follow us on Twitter/X at ghettoplex_mp4, on Instagram at ghettoplex.mp4, and on YouTube at ghettoplex. Speak No Evil, the 2022 Danish film. I wanted to watch this before I go and watch the American remake. Let me give you guys the spoiler-free breakdown. It is a good film, but it is a little slow in the beginning. These families get together in Italy for a retreat. It's not really clear what it is. It's just several families gather together at this sort of a resort in Italy and just enjoy the country, that rural part of the country. It is here our two families meet that eventually go on their journey together. They have chemistry right off the bat when they take a little lunch together, where an invitation is first extended. After returning home, however, they still have that fresh feeling of excitement from the vacation they were just on. And having communicated with the other family that they were getting along with, the other couple and their child, their kids were the same age. So for them, they hit it off right away because their kids could hang out and they could also get along together as two families on vacation. So they get an invitation again, a second invitation from this family to come and visit them in their home, which this family accepts because of the good time they had. So the family accepts the invitation and they leave. They go to the countryside, the Dutch countryside. And I believe it takes them about an 8-hour commute by car and by sea. When they get there immediately, there are little things that the inviting couple, Patrick and his wife, they do that makes the other couple slightly not uncomfortable, but it's just awkward. So the tension builds very slow in this film with just awkward interactions slowly escalating to very tense interactions. And as the couple tries to figure out a way to leave, the other Patrick and his wife, Bjorn. So Bjorn and Louisa, I believe her name is. Let me pull this up. Bjorn and Louise find it very hard to leave the house out of coming off as a disrespectful guests. They don't want to be rude, but they're also very uncomfortable with the way their stay has been at Patrick's place with his wife. Her name is Karen. But through some slight psychological manipulation, Patrick and Karen are able to keep them at the house. And it's just so crazy because eventually what happens at the end of the film, it makes me wonder, like with the opportunities they did have to leave, would they have left if they had known they were later going to find out? Anyways, to wrap it up for the non-spoiler part of this review, the film is very slow in the beginning. The tension builds at an extremely slow pace, but when you get to the end of the film, it is so brutal. So the film's about an hour and 40 minutes. I guess if you want to watch the film, if you don't mind watching the film for an hour and 20 minutes, the final half hour, the final 25 minutes to half hour is extremely psychotic. Let's get to spoilers now. If you haven't watched the original version, or if you're planning on watching the American version and you don't want anything spoiled, I haven't seen the American version yet because it hasn't come out, but I'm gonna get into spoilers, so I don't know how much it's gonna spoil the remake, or if you plan on watching this one, if it's gonna spoil it for you. So come back if you don't want spoilers. So I've already established that these two families, Patrick and Karen, invite Bjorn and Louise to their home in the rural countryside somewhere in Germany. I believe it's Germany. Because of the positive interaction they had with the couple on their vacation to Italy, they accept the invitation and make their way to the countryside. As far as the pacing, like I said, it's very slow. They do this thing with the music leading up to the film where they play these eerie, creepy, horrifying sounds, this score, but nothing horrifying is ever happening. So it just doesn't really make sense to play a lot of this horrifying music until they get to the end of the film. But as I'm watching leading up to that point, sometimes you're just seeing the countryside, or they're just walking and there's like horrifying music. It doesn't really make sense why they're playing it because nothing creepy is happening. There's nothing horrifying. So it just feels weird to score that with no situation to be scared of. The escalation, as I said, it builds up slow. So let me go through the list of the few things I remember from the awkward to the tense moments that this family goes through. When they first get to the house and they see where they're staying, Bjorn and Louise's daughter is going to stay with Patrick and Karen's son, Abel. So these two kids are going to stay in the room together. It's a boy and a girl, so the mom, you can tell the look on her face, she's already uncomfortable with it. And also they're going to have her sleep on the floor on like a futon on the floor. Then their first dinner, Patrick cooks up this fine piece of it's a fat roast. However, earlier in the film, when they're at dinner in Italy, Luis explains to them on their first lunch gathering, she's a vegetarian, which Patrick compliments her on. He says, "Oh, that's good for the environment." The first thing he serves her when they get to their house is this fat chunk of meat. And so she's already uncomfortable because she told him she's a vegetarian. And the first thing he offers her is a piece of meat, and he insists on her having this first bite. So already she feels that he's being an inconsiderate host. Then, much sooner than I was expecting, Abel and Bjorn have a moment in the backyard late at night where Abel opens his mouth and shows Bjorn his tongue is missing. So it's just slowly, there's just things out of place. It's not confrontational, it's just very unsettling. Well, it goes from awkward to then unsettling, especially when Abel shows Bjorn his removed tongue. But Bjorn is told later by Patrick this is a condition that he was born with. Patrick has Bjorn and Luis under the impression that he's a doctor because he lied to them. He told them that he was a doctor when they were in Italy. But we get more of an idea of the way how much of a sociopath Patrick is with the things he does. On their second night there, they go to a local restaurant where they have dinner again, but it's just the parents, and the kids are left behind at the house, which the mother, Louise, originally she was uncomfortable with, but they proceed anyways because they don't want to be rude guests yet again. And it is there before they leave to their dinner date. They meet. There's another man comes through to babysit the children, which adds this other layer of, hey, who am I leaving my kid with? I'm not comfortable leaving my kid with this strange man. But Patrick and Karen assure them, he babysits our kid all the time. Everyone uses this guy. So they assure them. They go to this dinner and things get a little bit more awkward because, again, the vegetarian situation comes up between Luis and Patrick. Then Patrick and Karen dance very provocatively with each other, very drunk, and they even drive home drunk. It gets very dangerous. Just the drive back home is dangerous because of how drunk Patrick is. So they decide, okay, you know what? We've had enough of this awkward interaction. We're leaving. They take their daughter. They leave. However, the daughter, she has this stuffed bunny that she's attached to, and she leaves it at the house, and she's throwing a fit because she wants her bunny back. And Bjorn, trying to be a good dad, is like, you know what? We'll go back. I'll get the bunny and then we'll leave. But upon returning, Patrick then feels disrespected because Bjorn and Luis, they just leave without saying goodbye. So they're like, what's going on? Why are you guys leaving? They don't understand. Well, they act as if they don't understand why they want to leave. So they have this very awkward and tense conversation about how uncomfortable they've been since they've got there, or how uncomfortable it's become, not how uncomfortable they've been, because like I said, it builds up very slowly. Because there's things that happen where you're like, okay, is that in the beginning, like the daughter sleeping on the floor, the vegetarian thing, it's like slight inconvenience, so you don't think of it as much, but it just builds up over time. And they explain to them, you know what, we don't want to be rude, but we're just not comfortable staying here anymore. But Patrick and Karen put on these like puppy dog eyes, like convince them to stay. And so they do. It's like, you were almost out. Why did you let this little puppy dog eye act fool you? Anyways, they stay and things still continue to get even more. For a moment, things get good again. So you're kind of like, okay, so where's this going? Because now Patrick and Karen are kind of behaving, and it's making the Bjorn and Luis, it's gotten them comfortable. So they're like, okay, it's not so bad. Maybe we overreacted. But then the tension builds up again when they have lunch, and Patrick's talking about Dutch cheese, and the dance situation happens. Agnes, I forget the daughter's name. Well, the daughter and Abel, I her name was Agnes. Agnes and Abel. I'm just gonna call her Agnes. I believe that's her name. Agnes and Abel want to show their parents a little dance routine they came up with, and because Abel he's got like 2 left feet. He's got no coordination. Patrick really unnecessarily scorns him because he can't dance. And it gets extremely uncomfortable for the family. And the daughter now is feeling the tension from Patrick. So now we've added this layer of hostility where Patrick really over disciplines Abel for not being able to dance correctly. So things just get super uncomfortable because the family, Bjorn eventually stands up and doesn't take it anymore. And he gets more confrontational with Patrick and says, hey, why are you overreacting about your kid not being able to dance? So from here is where it really just gets crazy after the dancing, because they still stay after this extremely uncomfortable situation that happened between the kids and the adults over a dance routine. They still decide to stay. However, Bjorn gets up due to some unsettling, his inability to sleep. And as he's walking around the house, there's things left on, like the TV's left on, the water's left running, there's doors open. So he can just hear these things from the bedroom that they're staying in. So he gets up, he turns off the TV, turns off the water, he's closing doors. And then he comes across a room where the plot just takes a turn. And he sees this small room that is plastered with photos of, it must have been at least 100 families that have come to visit because they take pictures. Patrick and Karen take pictures with these different families that they meet. And it is here he sees all these kids that are the same age as their daughter and as Abel. But they see Abel and he's with a different family. And then Bjorn makes this connection like, oh, Abel is not their child. And he sees them with all these different children. So the light turns on, a light bulb turns on above Bjorn's head, figuratively. Like the light turns on in his head like, oh my God, these people have been kidnapping kids from these families. And then when he walks into the next room where the pool is, the indoor pool, he sees Abel, and Abel's in the pool face down, like drowned. He's dead. Abel is dead. And Bjorn then takes action because he's like, oh my God, they're going to kidnap my daughter and who knows what else. He gets the picture. This is like a serial killer couple. So again, they manage to get in their car and leave. But through a series of events, he explains earlier too how technology, he wishes he could navigate without technology because he always has to use his GPS and he doesn't know how to properly read a map. And this turns into an Achilles heel because they get lost and then get stuck. Their car gets stuck. And as Bjorn goes to call for help, he sees a house up the road or into the field. He leaves his wife and his daughter in the car to go call for help. They're almost out. And as he gets to the house, it's empty. He returns to the car and his family is gone. But later to catch up with him, it's Patrick and Karen, and they have his daughter and his wife Louise in the car. And it is here where the brutality just takes front stage because they basically, with the help of the babysitter who is waiting for them up the road, they take the daughter, they chop her tongue off the way they chopped off Abel's tongue, and they continue to, basically she's gone. They take her, they kidnap her, and Bjorn and Louise are in such a state of shock that they kind of just give up at that point. They just accept what has happened. And as they drive off, they take them to this kind of a swamp. It's not a swamp, but it's like a marsh. I don't know. It's rural area, but they kind of take them into this. Well, they take them into this area that looks like when it rains, it fills up to a lake, but because it's whatever time of the year it is, it's not a full lake. So it's basically this lake bed that isn't full. And it is there that they strip them down. And finally, Bjorn asks, why are you doing this to us? And Patrick says, because you let us. And it's here from the film that I get, at least the moral of the story, if you want to call it that, is if you allow things to just happen that you're not comfortable with, then they will happen. So Patrick and Karen basically execute Bjorn and Louise by stone. They basically stoned them to death. And then they take Agnes, the daughter, and begin a new family where I'm sure this is, the cycle will continue. They will find another family that will not stand up for themselves and take their child, which, will leave Agnes as the next Abel. She will die in some way. So it's very dark at the end, the bad guys win. So yeah, like I said, very slow pacing. It's not until you get to the last half hour of the film, maybe the last 20 minutes of the film, that things really pick up. So if you're into a slow burn of a movie, it is definitely an interesting watch. I'm curious to see how they tell this story in the American version. If you've seen this movie, let me know. Are you excited to see the remake? Are you curious, or is this one of those things where you're like, oh, don't ruin the original? Me, like I said, I did like David Fincher's version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. However, I will be honest, I didn't watch the original, but I am a big David Fincher fan, so I think my bias is blinding me here. I don't actually know who's directing. Let me see who's directing the original, the new Speak No Evil. So the director of the American version is James Watkins. I'm not familiar with his films, so who knows how this is going to go. But that's it for this review. Follow us on Twitter/X at GhettoPlex_MP4, on Instagram at GhettoPlex.mp4, and on YouTube at GhettoPlex. See you guys in the next one.